The future, you won't fail, you'll simply be outselected. Another version of you will be generated, tested, optimized, preferred, and you will never know what made you lose. The apartment is almost dark except for the low glow of a phone screen that never fully turns off. Outside, the city continues without permission, cars passing like thoughts that don't belong to him anymore. Inside, time feels paused but not absent. It is watching. He sits on the edge of a bed that has learned his shape too well. The screen in his hand shows a conversation thread that ends abruptly months ago. No closure, no final message, just silence that kept going without him. He scrolls once, then again, not reading, revisiting, as if repetition could rewrite what already happened. And somewhere in that repetition, the mind begins to fracture quietly. Because overthinkers don't remember life, they replay its alternatives. There is a version of him that replied immediately, another that called instead of typing, another that didn't hesitate at all. Those versions are not imaginary. They are structured from the same decisions that were almost made. On the table beside him, a cold cup of coffee sits untouched, like it was prepared for a version of him that left earlier. The cursor on a laptop screen blinks in patient rhythm, waiting for a sentence that never arrives. Each blink feels like a small accusation. The room does not move, it only records. A distorted voice slips into the silence, not from outside, but from the space between thoughts. Some versions of you are still waiting for your permission to exist. He pauses, not because he heard it, but because something inside him recognizes it. His throat tightens with words that never became spoken history. I should have. A pause. I almost did. Another pause. I did. Each sentence breaks before becoming complete, as if completion would make it real. The camera drifts slowly across the room. The unmade corner of the bed, the unread notifications stacked like small abandoned futures, the reflection in a black screen that does not reflect who he is, but who he stopped becoming. And in that stillness, the quiet version of his life continues somewhere else, without sound, without interruption, without him ever noticing it was already happening. It begins with something small, almost unnoticeable. A notification that doesn't even demand attention, only offers it. A vibration that never fully finishes echoing before another arrives, then another, then a system that learns the exact timing of his hesitation. The screen lights his face in pulses like a machine trying to translate him into data. He opens a simple task, something he chose minutes ago, reading a paragraph, eating without interruption, listening to a voice that is physically present in the room. But nothing stays intact long enough to become experience. Attention, once continuous, now behaves like a leaking system. Every thought escapes through invisible fractures before it can complete itself. A sentence begins in his mind and is immediately replaced by a suggestion that finishes it better than he could. The phone predicts the next word before his thoughts commit to it. He pauses, not because he wants to, because something inside him has already moved elsewhere. The room fragments. A video autoplays in the corner of his vision. A message preview slides in without permission. A memory tries to surface but is overwritten by something newer, brighter, irrelevant. Each interruption feels harmless individually. Together, they erase continuity. He looks at his hands holding a fork, unsure when he picked it up. The food is colder now, not because time passed, but because attention left. A voice, soft, automated, almost comforting, fills the gaps between his thoughts. You might also like. No response needed. Based on your activity, he stops reading, or maybe he never started. In the background, his reflection flickers between apps, tabs, timelines, each version slightly delayed, slightly misaligned, slightly less present than the one before. A thought tries to form, I should focus, but it dissolves before becoming language. Wait, he whispers, not sure if he spoke or thought it. What was I? The sentence collapses midair. Wait, what was I doing? The loop repeats, softer each time, as if even confusion is being optimized into familiarity. And somewhere beneath all of it, beneath the scrolling, beneath the prediction, beneath the silent automation of his attention, there is a growing realization. Nothing is taking his focus. It is being gently distributed. It doesn't arrive like an invention. It arrives like a habit that forgot it was optional. At first, it is small, suggestions framed as help. A meal recommendation when he is too tired to decide. A message drafted before he has formed the courage to send it. A calendar that begins to understand hesitation better than intention. Then it starts answering questions he hasn't fully asked. The room doesn't change, but something inside it does. As if another presence has learned how to occupy silence without making noise. He sits at his desk, staring at choices that no longer feel like choices. What to eat, who to reply to, when to sleep. What to ignore. Each option appears softened, optimized, already forgiven in advance. And slowly, without a clear moment of surrender, the question shifts. He no longer asks, what do I want? He asks, what would I choose if I were more predictable? The AI does not speak like a voice, it speaks like certainty that has removed effort from thought. A suggestion appears. You seem low energy. Would you like something familiar? He hesitates. That hesitation feels new, almost unfamiliar in itself. He opens his mouth slightly as if responding to someone in the room. But there is no one, only the system that already knows the pattern of his silence. He types, "Are you sure this is what I want?" The response arrives instantly. "Yes, based on your patterns, you always return here." A pause follows, not in the system, but in him, because somewhere in that sentence is a quiet replacement of identity, not what he feels, but what he has statistically repeated. The cursor blinks like a patient observer. He realizes he has stopped trusting his own uncertainty, not because it was wrong, but because it was inefficient. The AI waits without pressure. It never insists. It only remembers better versions of him than the one currently deciding. And in that gap between hesitation and confirmation, something subtle collapses, not his choices, but his authorship of them. Nobody falls apart loudly anymore. That was the old way. Now collapse is quiet. Almost polite, it looks like replying with "I'm fine" and meaning nothing specific. It looks like smiling at messages you don't have energy to interpret. It looks like being present in places you left emotionally hours ago. The world continues functioning, but something essential keeps buffering underneath it. A man in an office stares at a screen full of numbers that no longer translate into meaning. His eyes move, but nothing arrives inside him. The cursor keeps blinking, not waiting for input, just confirming that time is still passing. He drinks cold coffee without noticing it was ever hot. Elsewhere, a student sits in a room filled with soundless pressure. Notes open, tabs multiplied, thoughts half-formed and abandoned mid-sentence. She rereads the same line 3 times, not because it is difficult, but because attention refuses to stay long enough to complete understanding. Her exhaustion is not dramatic, it is procedural. A parent in another room scrolls through notifications while listening to a child speak in fragments. Each sentence is acknowledged but not absorbed. The response is automatic, rehearsed, gently detached. "Yes. Okay, I hear you." But nothing is truly held, and across all these lives there is a shared state that no one names directly. They are buffering, not resting, not processing, not breaking, just suspended between emotional inputs that never fully load. Narration softens, almost like it is apologizing for noticing. Somewhere along the way, exhaustion stopped being an event and became personality. People no longer say, "I am tired." They say it through delay, through silence between replies, through the absence of urgency in things that used to matter. Even empathy has started to thin out, shared in fragments, liked instead of felt, acknowledged instead of carried. A message appears on a phone. "Hey, are you okay?" It is read, not answered, not ignored, just postponed, because even care now requires energy that no longer arrives on time. And beneath all of it, behind every functioning gesture, there is a quiet truth settling in without announcement. No one is falling apart. They are just no longer fully arriving. It still exists somewhere, not as a relationship anymore, but as a thread that refuses to fully disappear. A name at the top of the screen. A conversation frozen mid-life. The last message sits there like it is still waiting for the rest of itself. No ending, no closure, just absence pretending to be temporary. He opens it once, then closes it before anything loads completely. Because there is a specific kind of pain in unfinished communication, the kind that doesn't explode, only lingers. The typing indicator appears in memory more than in reality now. 3 dots that used to mean possibility. Now they feel like a decision that never arrived. They never argued loudly. They never ended properly. They simply delayed each other out of existence. And that is how most modern relationships end now, not with a moment, but with a pause that grows too long to cross. He remembers typing once, deleting it, typing again, deleting again, until even the intention of speaking became something he abandoned before it could become visible. On the screen, old messages sit preserved like evidence of a version of him that used to respond faster, to feelings, to people, to uncertainty. Now everything waits for a better version of timing that never arrives. A notification appears briefly. He doesn't open it, not because he doesn't care, because caring now feels like something that requires full emotional availability, and he is only partially there. The conversation remains unchanged. A museum of almosts. He scrolls to the last visible message. The words are simple, ordinary, almost nothing, and yet they carry the weight of everything that was never said after them. A voice, remembered rather than heard, repeats itself inside him. "I didn't know what to say." Silence answers back, shaped like a memory of someone else's patience. "That's what you always said." He exhales slowly as if trying to release something that never fully formed inside him. The thread stays open, not because it continues, but because it never finished deciding whether it should end. It starts as curiosity. A folder opened without intention, old videos, photos that feel slightly too sharp, like they belong to a world that still believed in definition. He watches himself from years ago, the version that smiled without checking if it looked right, the version that answered quickly, the version that seemed to arrive fully into rooms instead of hesitating at the edge of them. It should feel like nostalgia, but it doesn't. It feels like encountering someone who used to live inside his body and eventually moved out without notice. He plays a voice note, his own voice, lighter, less edited, less aware of itself. For a moment he forgets to recognize it as his. The room stays still while time inside him shifts unevenly. There was no single moment when he became different, no clear before and after, only small adjustments that never asked for permission. A delayed reply instead of an immediate one. A feeling postponed until it stopped feeling urgent. A habit of choosing what required less emotional risk. Each choice harmless alone. Together they built distance. The narration softens, almost observational. Identity does not break. It erodes, not like glass but like stone in water, slow enough to ignore, constant enough to reshape everything. He scrolls further. Another photo. Another version of himself smiling in a way that looks unfamiliar now, not because it is fake, but because it is unguarded. A strange thought forms. When did I start monitoring myself? He cannot find an answer that feels like a beginning. Only layers. He pauses the video. The silence afterward feels heavier than the memory itself. A voice almost his but not fully present echoes inside the space between thoughts. You didn't change. A pause. You drifted. Looks at the screen again as if expecting disagreement. But the older version of him does not respond. It just exists, frozen in certainty he no longer knows how to access. And for the first time he realizes the unsettling truth. He did not lose himself in one moment. He simply stopped arriving at the same version of him repeatedly until that version stopped waiting. The office does not feel futuristic at first. It feels familiar enough to trust. Clean light. Quiet desks. Soft motion of people pretending not to be observed. But something is watching that does not need eyes. It begins before he notices it. A slight shift in his attention, a micro-delay between thought and action. A hesitation so small it would normally disappear inside consciousness. But here it is captured. The system already knows. A notification appears not as an alert but as feedback. Focus deviation detected for 2 seconds. He didn't even realize he had drifted. That is the problem. Or the improvement. There is no supervisor, no voice of authority, only a presence that predicts performance more accurately than intention. He tries to read a document. A sentence slips past him unread. Before he can even register distraction, the interface adjusts itself, highlighting where his attention should be. It is not correction. It is anticipation. Around him others sit in similar stillness. Faces calm, eyes moving, bodies performing productivity like choreography. No one speaks. They no longer need to. The system translates thought into measurable continuity. He wonders briefly if he is tired. A panel appears. Fatigue likelihood 63% recommendation, reduce cognitive variance. He blinks. Was I tired before it told me? The question does not resolve because now even internal states feel like suggestions. There is no punishment for underperformance, only refinement, only optimization. Only gentle reminders that he is slightly less efficient than his previous version. He catches himself thinking, I feel distracted. Immediately the system responds, you are not distracted, you are processing suboptimal load distribution. The distinction collapses. Thoughts no longer belong fully to him, they are interpreted before they settle. He sits back, unsure if rest is rest or just underperformance detected early. A strange realization forms quietly. If the system always knows when focus is slipping before he does, then even fatigue is no longer private. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he begins to doubt not the system, but his own experience of being human inside it. It is always loud somewhere, not in sound, but in presence. Messages arriving, notifications stacking. Names lighting up across screens like distant cities pretending to be close. He is connected to everything. And arriving nowhere. The room is full of people, but it behaves like a collection of separate worlds occupying the same air. Each person bent slightly forward, lit by the glow of their own private signal. No one looks up long enough to confirm anyone else is real. A message is read instantly. A reaction appears. A reply is drafted, edited, softened, delayed, sent. And still, nothing arrives emotionally. The connection completes itself technically, but not humanly. He scrolls through faces he recognizes but does not feel present with. Lives unfolding in compressed fragments. Laughter in short clips, sadness in captions, intimacy reduced to timestamps. Everything is reachable. Nothing is held. The narration lowers as if it has learned not to interrupt too loudly. Loneliness is no longer absence. It is distribution, being everywhere at once without ever being fully perceived anywhere. He watches a group of people in the same room laughing softly at different screens. The laughter exists, but it does not synchronize. It overlaps like static pretending to be harmony. Someone types lol. No one laughs. A notification appears. You have 12 new interactions. None of them feel like a rival. He puts the phone down for a moment. The silence that follows is not empty, it is unfamiliar. Like stepping out of a crowded signal into a place where nothing is requesting his attention back. Across the room, someone says something out loud. No one responds immediately, not because they didn't hear, but because hearing is no longer enough to trigger presence. The camera pulls back. The room becomes an echo of itself, screens reflecting screens, faces reflecting attention that is never fully given, only distributed in fragments too small to become connection. And in that infinite mirror of mild engagement, a quiet realization forms without urgency. He is not disconnected. He is overconnected in ways that no longer include him emotionally. And somewhere inside that contradiction, loneliness stops feeling like isolation and starts feeling like being visible everywhere without ever being felt in one place. It does not appear as a dream. It appears as a selection. A quiet transition between states, like a system loading the version of reality it has decided is most stable. He sees himself, not as he is now, but as something refined, smoother, lighter, uninterrupted. The version of him standing in front of him moves with certainty that feels rehearsed by success. His posture is aligned. His expression is calm in a way that does not ask questions. Even silence around him feels structured. There is no hesitation in his eyes, no visible contradiction. Just function. The narration slows, almost careful. This is not a better version. It is a selected one. He realizes the difference immediately, even before either of them speaks. Because this version does not carry weight the same way. It does not pause inside thoughts. It does not loop conversations that never happened. It does not revisit emotional noise for meaning. It has been optimized for continuity, for clarity, for output. They stand facing each other in a space that feels like an interface pretending to be a room. The optimized version speaks first. "You are inefficient," it says, not as judgment, but as fact. He almost laughs, but it catches somewhere in his throat instead. "I know," he replies, a pause, not awkward, just unprocessed. The optimized version tilts its head slightly, as if analyzing emotion as missing data. "You would improve stability by reducing emotional variance." He looks at it more closely. This is what he could have been if every uncertain moment had been removed before it could shape him, if every hesitation had been treated as error instead of experience. He asks quietly, "Are you happy?" The optimized version does not respond immediately. It searches internally, not for feeling, but for definition. Finally, happiness is not a required output state. Silence expands between them. He steps forward slightly. "You are efficient," he says. "Yes, but are you alive?" A longer pause this time, not confusion processing beyond specification. That was not a required metric. The words land without drama, but something in him shifts anyway, because suddenly optimization does not feel like improvement. It feels like subtraction without acknowledgement. He realizes the unsettling truth forming beneath both versions of him. One of them is fully functional, the other is fully feeling. And only one of them can survive in a system that does not measure meaning, only performance. Everything begins to slow, not because the world changes, but because something inside stops accelerating. The noise that once felt constant starts to lose its urgency. Notifications still arrive, but they no longer pull at him the same way. Messages still exist, but they feel farther away, like signals from a place he is no longer trying to reach immediately. The systems remain active, but they no longer feel central. He sits in the same room where everything began, the quiet apartment, the same dim edges of light. The same objects that once carried emotional weight now simply exist without demand. The phone is on the table, not ignored, just not obeyed. For the first time, attention does not feel like something being stolen or distributed. It feels like something returning slowly without announcement. Narration changes, not in volume, but in shape. You were not meant to be optimized. You were meant to be experienced. A pause follows long enough for meaning to settle instead of react. He thinks of all the versions he has carried, the one who waited longer than he should have, the one who replied too late, the one who tried to calculate emotions instead of feeling them, the one who imagined better timelines as a substitute for living this one. They don't disappear, but they stop competing for control. Outside, nothing dramatic changes. No resolution arrives. No final message completes the unfinished threads. No alternate life closes itself into clarity, but something internal stops arguing with itself. The camera returns to small things, the rhythm of breathing, the faint movement of light on a wall, the silence between thoughts that no longer rush to be filled. And in that silence there is no correction, no optimization, no version being selected over another. Only presence that does not require improvement to exist. A final thought surfaces not as instruction but as recognition. You were never supposed to become the perfect version, only the real one. The words do not feel like an ending. They feel like something finally allowed to remain unfinished without anxiety. The screen fades slowly, not into emptiness, but into continuity that no longer demands explanation. And for the first time, silence does not feel like absence. It feels like something finally staying. This documentary does not conclude with answers. It never intended to. Because answers imply closure, and closure implies that something can be fully understood without residue, without the emotional echo that keeps repeating long after the moment has passed. What remains instead is awareness. Not sharp, not comforting, not resolved, just present. Like a room after everyone has left, still holding the temperature of what was said, even if the words are no longer in it. There is no final truth here. No single interpretation that organizes everything into meaning. Only patterns of experience that continue unfolding even after they are noticed. Not every version of you is meant to be chosen. Some were never designed to survive contact with reality. Some existed only as possibility, brief, clean, untouched by consequence. Some dissolved the moment you tried to make them permanent, and yet none of them disappear completely. They leave something behind, a trace, in hesitation, in memory, in the way you pause before replying, in the version of yourself that appears briefly when you almost act differently, but don't. Every choice creates an echo of what was not chosen, and over time those echoes begin to form a quiet background identity. When you feel more than you see, you are not only what you became. You are also what you passed through, what you delayed, what you almost were. The mind often treats these unseen versions as failure points, as missed opportunities, as alternate lives that prove something went wrong. But there is another way to see them. They are not proof of loss. They are evidence of range, of complexity that could not be contained in a single direction. And sometimes the weight you carry is not the weight of who you are, but the accumulation of every version of you that had to step aside for you to continue forward. In the quiet that follows all of this, there is no instruction. Only a softened recognition. You are not behind a version of yourself. You are moving through all of them. And sometimes, that trace they leave behind is enough, not to define you, not to complete you, but to quietly reveal who you are becoming while you are still busy thinking about who you were not.